In the heart of the city, where skyscrapers gleamed like silver towers and fortunes were built with handshakes over crystal glasses, Makayla Jones lived a life far removed from the glittering world of the elite. She was a gifted young chef, with dreams of one day running her own catering business, a dream nurtured in the warmth of her grandmother's kitchen, where every recipe carried the taste of home and the comfort of love. It was at a high-profile corporate dinner that their worlds first touched. Makayla had been hired to prepare an intimate meal for the Winters Global Executive Board, a gathering held in the penthouse suite of the city's most exclusive hotel. She worked quietly behind the scenes, arranging plates with careful precision, unaware that the man whose name topped the guest list had paused at the kitchen door. Kolter Winters, heir to the Winters fortune, was accustomed to power and polish. His life was one of boardrooms, tailored suits, and carefully calculated alliances. Yet when he saw Makayla, her brow slightly furrowed in concentration, her hand steady as she placed a sprig of rosemary on a roasted lamb dish, something in him stilled. He lingered, making light conversation as she worked, charmed by her warmth and unshaken composure, in the presence of someone whose last name carried weight in every financial circle. Makayla, unaccustomed to such attention from a man like Kolter, found herself drawn to the quiet intelligence in his gaze, the way his voice softened when he asked about her craft. One dinner led to another meeting, and soon the unlikely pair began stepping into each other's worlds. Kolter introduced her to fine galas and charity balls, where her natural grace caught attention. Makayla, in turn, brought him to small family gatherings, where laughter was loud and food was served from steaming platters passed around a crowded table. At first, Aaliyah Winters, Kolter's mother, regarded Makayla with cool civility. She was polite in public, but her eyes measured every detail: her background, her education, the way she spoke. In the Winters family, every union was as much a business decision as it was a personal one. A chef with no social pedigree was, in Aaliyah's view, an ill fit for a son who would one day inherit the family empire. Yet Makayla's kindness was difficult to dismiss. She greeted Aaliyah with respect, never bristling at her veiled remarks. Over time, her sincerity began to chip away at Aaliyah's frost. When Kolter announced their engagement, the family's approval was not given with enthusiasm, but neither was it withheld. Their wedding was elegant but intimate, a blending of two worlds that had once seemed too far apart to touch. For a time, happiness reigned. Makayla and Kolter built a life in the grand Winters estate, filling its high-ceilinged halls with laughter and shared dreams. And when Makayla discovered she was expecting, the news brought joy so profound it seemed to silence every lingering doubt. But joy can be fragile. One bitter winter evening, tragedy struck. Makayla collapsed in the middle of a family dinner, pain ripping through her so fiercely that Kolter carried her to the car himself. At the hospital, the doctor spoke in hushed voices. 5 months along, premature labor. The chances were slim. Kolter was devastated, but Aaliyah saw the moment as proof of what she had always believed. Standing at her son's side, she spoke in a tone that left no room for argument. "A woman who cannot carry a child to term has no place in our family, Kolter." Her words, cold and sharp, sank deep, and in his grief, confusion, and longing for his mother's approval, Kolter listened. The next days blurred together. While Makayla recovered, heartbroken, aching for the child she believed she had lost, papers were drawn up. The marriage ended without a fight, without even a conversation, reduced to legal signatures and property divisions. The grand house that had once been her home belonged solely to Kolter again. Makayla left with nothing but her dignity and a heart broken in ways she could not yet name. What no one in the Winters family knew, what even Kolter did not know, was that the story was far from over. Makayla returned to her childhood home the night the divorce papers were finalized. The cold wind followed her inside as she set her small suitcase by the door, her body heavy with exhaustion. Her mother, Janet Jones, took one look at her daughter's pale face and red-rimmed eyes and knew something had gone terribly wrong. "Makayla, baby, what happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. Makayla sank onto the couch, clutching the blanket Janet draped over her shoulders. Her voice was low, as though speaking the truth aloud might shatter her all over again. "It's over, Mama." Kolter, he listened to her. "Alexia never approved of me. From the day we met, she was always dropping hints about my status, about the kind of woman he needed. Someone from their circle, with their name, their money, their bloodline. And now, she's convinced him I don't belong because of the baby." Janet's eyes narrowed, the hurt in her gaze quickly hardening into steel. "It's his loss," she said firmly. "A black woman is stronger than that. We know how to rise when life tries to push us down. You hear me? We are built to survive storms they couldn't stand in for a single day." Makayla's lips trembled, the tears threatening to fall again. "He didn't even fight for me, Mama. Not once. He let her decide our marriage for us." Janet shook her head slowly. "Then Kolter Winters is a weak man. A man who allows his mother to run his life will never be free. And neither will the woman who ties herself to him. One day, he'll realize what he lost. And when that day comes, you'll be so far ahead, he won't be able to reach you." In that quiet living room, Janet held her daughter until the tears stopped. Her words planting seeds of resilience that Makayla would carry into the battles yet to come. The hospital corridors hummed with the low rhythm of machines and hurried footsteps. Fluorescent lights cast a pale glow over everything. But to Makayla, the world had narrowed to a single space, the neonatal intensive care unit. She stood at the edge of a clear incubator, her breath fogging the glass as she looked down at the tiny miracle who had defied every grim prediction. Aaliyah Winters Jones was no larger than a doll, her fragile chest rising and falling with the help of tubes and wires. Her skin was soft as petals, her hair a crown of delicate curls. The doctors had been cautious, their words wrapped in warnings. "She's very premature, survival isn't certain. It will be a long road." Makayla listened, but she refused to let fear write the ending. She slipped her finger into the incubator, and Aaliyah's impossibly small hand wrapped around it. As if to say, "I'm still here." That single touch became Makayla's anchor. She spent her days by Aaliyah's side, reading softly from her favorite childhood books, humming lullabies her grandmother once sang to her. At night, when the nurses insisted she rest, she worked, booking small catering jobs, delivering orders herself, sometimes returning to the hospital in the same clothes she'd worn the day before. Janet became her steady ally, cooking meals for Makayla when she forgot to eat, keeping the bills barely paid when catering money ran thin. Together they learned how to measure life in ounces gained, heartbeats steadying, and oxygen levels climbing. Months passed. Against every odd, Aaliyah grew stronger, her cries louder, her gaze more focused. When the day finally came to take her home, Makayla held her close and whispered, "You are the reason I'm still standing." Neither of them knew it yet, but their fight for each other had only just begun. Life after the NICU was not easy. Makayla returned home with Aaliyah in one arm, and a future she would have to carve out with her own hands. Every cent she had was poured into keeping her daughter safe, warm, and healthy. Nights were long, not just from midnight feedings, but from the quiet hours when she planned menus, wrote proposals, and scoured the city for clients willing to take a chance on an unknown caterer. She worked from Janet's small kitchen, turning it into a whirlwind of simmering sauces, baking bread, and the clatter of mixing bowls. Baby Aaliyah often slept in a bassinet nearby, the gentle hum of Makayla's voice filling the air as she prepped meals. There were days when rejection came with such regularity, it threatened to crush her spirit. "You're too small a business. We already have a vendor. I'm not sure you can handle the volume." Each no was another brick in the wall she had to climb. But Makayla climbed anyway. She took small jobs, birthday dinners, office luncheons, church gatherings, each one a stepping stone. Word spread quietly. Her food was unforgettable, her service personal, her presence warm. By the second year, Makayla's business had a name, Aaliyah's Table, a tribute to the daughter who had inspired every step of her fight. The name itself became her silent reminder. She was building this not just for herself, but for the little girl whose future she had vowed to protect. 3 years after leaving the Winters estate, Makayla stood in her modest office, sorting through catering requests. That's when she saw it. An envelope heavier than most. Its cream paper, pressed with gold lettering. The sender's name glinted at the top. Kolter and Brooke cordially request your catering services for their engagement celebration. Makayla stared at it for a long time, the corners of her mouth tightening. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a challenge. And she already knew her answer. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, painting warm light over the counters where Makayla was slicing vegetables for a tasting appointment. The envelope sat beside her, its heavy cream paper catching the light as if it knew it carried trouble. Janet walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her eyes narrowing at the sight of the invitation. "What's that?" she asked. Makayla hesitated for a moment, then slid it across the counter. Janet adjusted her glasses and read the elegant gold lettering. The further she read, the tighter her lips became. Kolter Winters and Brooke Madison. Janet's voice held the weight of disbelief and a spark of anger. "And they want you to cater their engagement party?" Makayla gave a small nod. "It came this morning." Janet set the card down as if it might burn her. "I can see exactly what they're trying to do," she said firmly. "This isn't business, Makayla. It's bait. They want to parade you in front of all their people so they can watch you serve champagne to the woman who took your place." Makayla kept her gaze on the cutting board, but her knife slowed. "I know, Mama. You've worked too hard to walk back into that house for their entertainment," Janet pressed. "Alexia never hid how she felt about you. That woman made it her mission to remind Kolter of what she thought you lacked. And Brooke? She'll be waiting with a smile, sharp enough to cut glass." Makayla's hand stilled completely. "And maybe that's exactly why I should go." Janet's brows lifted, her voice softer now. "Baby girl, you think you're ready to face them?" Makayla looked her mother in the eye. "I'm not just ready. I have something they don't expect." 2 days after the invitation arrived, Brooke Madison called to arrange a private tasting. Her tone was brisk, professional, but with an undercurrent that Makayla could not quite read. The appointment was set for late afternoon at Aaliyah's table. When the doorbell chimed, Makayla smoothed her apron and opened the door, expecting Brooke alone. Instead, the bride-to-be swept in wearing a tailored cream coat, her hair in a perfect chignon, and behind her, like a shadow, came Alexia Winters. Makayla's pulse flickered, but she stepped aside, her voice warm. "Ladies, please come in." Brooke's eyes swept over the cozy tasting room with polite detachment. "Kolter won't be joining us," she said lightly, removing her gloves. "This is my wedding to plan, and I wanted his mother's insight." ... Makayla tilted her head slightly. "Does Kolter know I could be catering the wedding?" Alexia's laugh was soft, but dripping with disdain. "He doesn't need to be involved in these things. This is women's work. Besides, he has far more important matters to manage." Makayla only nodded and gestured toward the table she had prepared. 4 courses of delicate samples, each plated with care. She described each dish with the same calm professionalism she offered every client. But as she spoke, the undercurrent of the meeting became clear. Brooke exchanged glances with Alexia after each bite, their approval never voiced. Instead, they asked pointed questions about the size of Makayla's operation, her ability to handle large-scale events, her staff's credentials. Every word was framed to undermine her. Finally, Makayla closed her leather-bound scheduling book. "I should let you know," she said evenly. "The date you've requested is already booked." Alexia's brows arched, and Brooke gave a short, sharp laugh. "You can't possibly be too busy to accommodate us," Brooke said. "We'd be your most high-profile event to date." "I don't overbook," Makayla replied simply. That was when Brooke leaned forward, her voice smooth and deliberate. "We're prepared to make it worth your while." She named a figure that made even Makayla pause. It was more than she had ever been offered for a single event. Enough to pay off lingering debts and invest in equipment she'd been needing for months. From her place in the doorway, Janet had been silent, arms crossed, watching every flicker of expression between the 3 women. She saw the bait for what it was, the way Alexia's eyes glimmered with satisfaction, as if buying Makayla's presence was just another way to assert control. Janet's jaw tightened. If they tried to humiliate her daughter, she would take revenge herself if necessary. But before Janet could speak, Makayla rose gracefully from her chair. She smoothed her apron and smiled, a smile that gave nothing away. "If we do this," she said softly, "we do it my way. No last-minute changes, no substitutions, and I decide the service team." Alexia and Brooke exchanged another glance, both wearing the smug look of women who believed they'd just secured their victory. But Makayla's smile didn't waver. Inside, she knew the truth. They hadn't trapped her. She had just accepted the perfect stage. The Winters estate was alive with motion. Every corner of the sprawling property seemed to hum with preparations for the upcoming engagement celebration. Florists drifted through the halls, insistent, telling him that Makayla was not strong enough for their family, that she was not the right match for a Winters heir. And in his grief, his confusion, he had listened. He had walked away. Signing the divorce papers had been the easiest part. Living with what had made him was harder. Now she was returning to the house he had kept from her, the house she had once filled with warmth, not as his wife, but as the hired help. "Why her?" he asked, turning back to face them. Alexia smoothed a fold in her skirt, her expression serene. "Because she is talented. Despite everything, no one can deny her skill in the kitchen. And this event must be perfect." "There are dozens of caterers in the city," Kolter countered. "Not ones with her reputation," Brooke said, a faint glint in her eyes. "You know as well as I do, it will be a conversation piece. Guests will talk. They'll marvel at her professionalism. And they'll see, clearly, where you've moved on to." Kolter studied her. She wasn't saying it outright, but he heard the undercurrent. This wasn't about convenience. It was about spectacle. Brooke wanted to parade Makayla in front of 100 guests, as a quiet humiliation, a reminder of who held the power now. Alexia's silence only confirmed it. "I won't be part of making her a spectacle," he said, his voice low. Alexia folded her hands neatly. "You won't have to be. As I said, these are details better left to the women of the family. Besides, it is already arranged. Changing the plan now would be chaotic, and we have no room for chaos." Kolter's gaze shifted between them, his pulse tightening. He could push the matter, force them to find someone else. But the party was only weeks away, and he knew his mother. If she wanted Makayla there, she would find a way to keep her. The conversation ended, but the unease stayed with him. Long after he returned to his study. That night, he sat in the quiet, nursing a glass of bourbon. The amber liquid swirled in the crystal tumbler, catching the lamplight as he stared into the darkness beyond the window. He told himself his objection to Makayla's presence was about appearances, about not inviting trouble. But deep down, he knew better. And he remembered the way she never raised her voice in the face of his mother's cutting words, how she carried herself with quiet strength, even as Alexia chipped away at her. Brooke was beautiful, polished, and exactly what his mother wanted for him. But she didn't haunt his thoughts in the still hours of the night. Makayla did. And the idea of standing in the same room with her again, seeing her, smelling the faint trace of herbs on her skin, hearing her voice, was something Kolter wasn't sure he was ready for. Yet ready or not, it was going to happen. The Winters estate glowed like a jewel in the dusk. Strings of gold ribbon trailed from the high gates, catching the light of lanterns swaying in the evening breeze. Inside, chandeliers bathed the grand ballroom in warm brilliance, the air thick with the mingling scents of champagne, roses, and expensive perfume. Makayla stood at the back entrance, her catering team unloading trays and service carts. She had walked through these doors countless times during her marriage, always as the lady of the house. Tonight, she entered as hired staff. Her hands remained steady as she directed her crew, but her eyes swept over the glittering hall. Society's finest mingled in clusters, crystal glasses catching the light. Every familiar corner of the room seemed like a ghost from another life. The staircase where Kolter once kissed her cheek before a charity gala. The balcony where they had shared whispered dreams. The guests turned to watch her as she passed, their gazes a blend of curiosity and quiet gossip. They remembered her. They remembered the scandal. Near the grand fireplace, Brooke Madison stood resplendent in a gown of champagne silk, her hair swept into a perfect knot. She spotted Makayla and approached with a smile so thin it was almost invisible. "Well, isn't this a walk down memory lane?" Brooke said, her tone a shade too sweet. "I was hoping you'd be here tonight." Kolter didn't mention it, of course, but then again, he doesn't bother himself with the details. Try not to get nostalgic. This is our night, after all. Before Makayla could respond, a ripple of movement passed through the room as Kolter Winters stepped forward. In her deep emerald gown and diamonds that caught the light with every turn of her head, she exuded command. Her gaze found Makayla instantly. "Everyone," Aaliyah called, her voice ringing above the chatter. "Allow me to introduce our caterer for the evening. Some of you may recognize her. This is Makayla Jones, Kolter's first mistake." Laughter, brittle and hesitant, flitted through the crowd. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances, but Aaliyah continued, her smile cold. "We do believe in second chances here, don't we? Even when people have proven less than suitable for our world." Makayla stood rooted, her chin lifted. The words rolled over her, but they did not break her. She simply inclined her head politely and moved on, instructing her staff with calm authority. From across the room, Kolter Winters appeared. The years had sharpened his features, but there was a weight in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He looked older, not in age, but in spirit. Regret flickered there, quick and unguarded, before he masked it with formality. "Makayla," he said when he drew close, his voice low, "I never wanted this. Not like this." She didn't look at him. "Yet here we are." She adjusted a tray of hors d'oeuvres. "It's not what you say that matters, Kolter. It's what you choose to do. And you already made your choice." He flinched, but before he could speak, Brooke's voice rang out again, clear and commanding. She clinked her glass with a silver spoon, drawing the room's attention. "We have a special announcement," she said, her hand resting lightly on her still flat stomach. "Kolter and I are expecting our first child." Applause erupted. Aaliyah clapped her hands together, her expression alight with triumph. "Finally," she declared for all to hear, "a grandchild worthy of the Winters name." The words struck like a deliberate blow, aimed to reopen wounds that had never truly healed. The night Makayla lost her baby still lingered in her bones, in the shadows of her dreams. For a heartbeat, the memory threatened to steal her breath. But instead of crumbling, she felt something stronger take root. A calm, steady certainty. Her pulse slowed, her breathing deepened. Tonight was not their victory. Somewhere outside, Janet waited. And with her, a small, beautiful truth the Winters family believed was buried forever. Makayla scanned the room. Brooke basked in the attention. Alexia's satisfaction was palpable, and Kolter's smile was hollow, his eyes darting toward Makayla as if searching for something he could not name. Makayla reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and typed a short message. "It's time." The message had barely left Makayla's phone when her heartbeat slowed to a steady, unshakable rhythm. Across the ballroom, the polished celebration continued. Brooke glowing in the center of a circle of admirers, Aaliyah soaking in the praise, and Kolter standing beside them with a glass in his hand and a hollowness in his eyes. Makayla slipped away under the guise of checking the kitchen. The moment the door closed behind her, the noise of the party faded to a muted hum. She crossed the service hallway to the rear entrance and stepped outside into the cool night air. A familiar car pulled up to the circular drive. The passenger door opened, and Janet emerged, her expression a mix of resolve and anticipation. In the back seat sat the secret Makayla had carried for 3 years, her daughter, Aaliyah. The little girl sat in her car seat, her white dress pristine, her soft curls framing a face so delicate and yet so unmistakably Winters. Makayla's breath caught. She opened the door and lifted Aaliyah into her arms. The child giggled softly, clutching at her mother's necklace. "Are you sure?" Janet asked, her voice low but firm. "More sure than I've ever been," Makayla replied, her gaze fixed on the glowing windows of the ballroom. Inside, the music swelled as she stepped back into the grand hall. At first, no one noticed her return. She moved through the crowd, Aaliyah perched comfortably on her hip. But then heads began to turn. Conversations faltered. The resemblance was undeniable. The child's deep brown eyes, her small but proud chin, it was Kolter's face in miniature. Kolter himself turned, his gaze drawn instinctively to the shifting energy in the room. When his eyes found Makayla, they dropped to the child in her arms. His champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. "That's," his voice cracked. "That's impossible. The baby died." Makayla stopped in the center of the room, her voice clear. "No, Kolter, she didn't die. I saved her." A hush fell over the guests. Even the quartet had stilled, the final note of their piece hanging in the air. Kolter stepped forward slowly, as if approaching something fragile. I don't understand," the doctors said. "You heard what you wanted to hear. With your mother's help," Makayla said evenly. "You signed the divorce papers while I was in the hospital. 28 weeks pregnant, you didn't bother to see if she survived. But she did. You left her while she was fighting for her life in the NICU." Kolter's breath came in short, uneven bursts. "She's mine?" Makayla looked down at Aaliyah, who stared up at him with open curiosity. "Her name is Aaliyah. She's your daughter." From the side, Alexia's face had gone rigid, her calculating mind already racing through implications, the public fallout. Brooke's perfect composure cracked, her voice rising. "You said she was gone. How's there's a baby?" "Kolter." But Kolter wasn't listening. His entire world had narrowed to the little girl in Makayla's arms. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Let me hold her." Makayla shifted her weight, holding Aaliyah closer. "She doesn't know you. That's not something I can change tonight." Gasps rippled through the room. For once, the whispers were not about scandal. They were about truth, and the woman who had walked in with it. Makayla turned toward the door, Aaliyah safe in her embrace. And then she left the Winters estate for the second time. But this time, she didn't leave broken. The cool night air hit Makayla as she stepped off the Winters estate porch, Aaliyah's small head resting against her shoulder. She moved quickly toward her car, her heels clicking against the stone path. Behind her, a sharp voice split the night. "Kolter, get back here." Brooke's furious cry echoed off the marble walls, but Kolter didn't slow. The applause, the champagne, the perfect engagement tableau, it all fell away. "Makayla, wait." His footsteps pounded across the driveway as she secured Aaliyah in her car seat. She didn't turn. The engine roared to life, and the taillights bathed him in red as she pulled away. Kolter ran for his own car, his pulse racing. He didn't think, didn't plan. He only knew he couldn't let her vanish into the night again. The drive was a blur, headlights cutting through the dark streets until he recognized the modest neighborhood where Janet lived. Makayla parked, lifting her sleeping daughter carefully into her arms. As she stepped onto the porch, Janet opened the front door. She spotted Kolter pulling up behind them. Her posture shifted instantly, protective, unyielding. "You should have stuck around 3 years ago," Janet said sharply, her voice low but edged like steel. Kolter stopped short. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice raw. "I made a mistake. God, I made so many. Please, just let me see her. Let me see my daughter." Janet's eyes hardened. "You have her fiancé waiting for you. She's carrying your child, isn't she? Go home to her. You made your choice." Kolter shook his head, desperation flickering in his gaze. "It's not that simple. I never knew." Janet stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "No, you didn't want to know. You signed those papers without asking questions. You left my daughter alone in a hospital bed, fighting for her life and your child's. Now you want to walk in here because you've decided it matters. Love doesn't work like that." Kolter's jaw clenched, but his eyes shone. "Please, just 1 minute with her." Not tonight, Janet said, her voice final. And with that, she closed the door firmly in his face. Inside, Makayla had already gone to her room. She laid Aaliyah gently in her playpen before sitting on the edge of her bed. The tears came quietly, slipping down her cheeks as she buried her face in her hands. Outside, Kolter remained on the porch for a long moment before walking away into the night. Kolter didn't go home. The soft hum of the Winters global headquarters was all that kept him company as he sat in his corner office, city lights glimmering in the glass behind him. His tie hung loose around his neck, his jacket draped carelessly over a chair. The desk before him was littered with contracts he couldn't bring himself to read. He had spent years perfecting the art of control, over his business, over his image, over every aspect of his life. But tonight, that control had shattered. His mind kept circling back to Aaliyah's eyes, the way she had looked at him with quiet curiosity. She didn't know who he was, and why should she? He hadn't been there for her first breath, her first steps, her first words. Those moments belonged to Makayla. Kolter leaned forward, pressing the heels of his hands into his eyes. For the first time in years, he cried. He cried for the child he hadn't known, for the wife he had abandoned, for the choices that had seemed so final and now felt unbearably wrong. By morning, the story had already hit the press. A leaked photo of Makayla in the Winters ballroom, holding the toddler with unmistakable Winters features, sat on the front page of the city's most read gossip column. The headline read, "The Forgotten Heir. Winters' engagement party shaken by surprise child reveal." Kolter was halfway through the article when the door to his office burst open. Brooke stood there, her perfect hair slightly disheveled, eyes blazing. "Is it true?" she demanded, slamming the paper onto his desk. "Is that child yours?" Kolter's silence was answer enough. Brooke's voice rose. "You humiliated me. You humiliated us. Do you realize what this looks like? Our engagement, our entire image, is now under a microscope because you didn't have the decency to tell me your ex-wife was hiding your child." "She wasn't hiding her," Kolter said quietly. "I walked away before I even knew." Brooke laughed bitterly. "And now what? You're going to go running after her?" Kolter met her gaze steadily. "I'm going to fight for my daughter, whatever it takes." Brooke's lips parted in disbelief. "You'd throw away everything for them?" "I already did," Kolter replied. 3 years ago." Brooke's eyes narrowed, but he didn't look away. The decision had been made. The walls Makayla and Janet had built around Aaliyah were strong. But Kolter knew he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try to earn a place within them. The morning after the engagement party, the Winters estate was unusually quiet. The staff moved carefully, sensing the tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud. Brooke Madison strode through the marble foyer, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as she made her way to the sunroom. She found Aaliyah Winters seated near the tall windows, a cup of tea in her hands, staring out at the frost-covered gardens. "We need to talk," Brooke said without preamble, dropping into the chair across from her. "What are we going to do about this?" Aaliyah didn't look at her immediately. "About what?" "Don't play coy," Brooke snapped. "You saw what happened last night. Kolter's ex-wife waltzed in here with a child who looks exactly like him. We had a plan, Aaliyah. You can't go back on it now." Aaliyah finally turned her gaze to Brooke, her expression unreadable. "It's hard to keep the plan when you are not really pregnant." Brooke stiffened, her grip tightening on the arm of her chair. "That's irrelevant. We agreed. The wedding first, then a miscarriage, and by the time he realized he'd made a mistake, it would be too late. It would be too late for him to undo it." "That was before I learned I have a granddaughter," Aaliyah said evenly. Brooke's eyes narrowed. "You didn't want to know her 3 years ago. If you had, you wouldn't have pushed the divorce in the first place." Aaliyah's gaze drifted back to the gardens. "I see what the divorce has done to my son." Kolter was lighter before, softer. Now there's a heaviness in him I can't ignore. My words don't carry the same weight with him anymore. Brooke leaned forward, her voice sharp. So what? You're just going to let Makayla win? Do you think she'll let you anywhere near that child? No, Alexia admitted. Good luck to anyone who tries. Makayla will guard her daughter like a hawk. And truth be told, I respect her for that. Brooke pushed back her chair, fury flashing in her eyes. Respect her? You've lost your mind. If he chooses them, everything is over for us. Alexia took a slow sip of her tea, her voice calm. Perhaps it already is. The next morning, the winter air was still and sharp when Kolter Winters pulled into the narrow driveway of Janet Jones's modest home. He had barely slept, his mind a storm of regret and questions. This time, he wasn't leaving without speaking to Makayla. When the door opened, it was Janet standing there, her arms folded. Please, Kolter said without hesitation. I need to talk to her. Janet studied him for a long moment before answering. Come back in an hour. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. Kolter stepped back, watching her close the door. He didn't know that in that hour, Janet quietly drove Aaliyah to daycare, making certain there would be no chance for an accidental meeting. When Kolter returned, Makayla opened the door herself. Her hair was pulled back, her expression unreadable. She's gone, she said before he could ask. Daycare. Kolter's disappointment was visible, his shoulders slumping. I hope to see her. Makayla didn't move from the doorway. Why, Kolter? Why now? Why 3 years later, when you left me in a hospital bed and sent divorce papers instead of showing up? He opened his mouth, but she kept going, her voice trembling with the weight of everything she'd held in. How long had you planning to leave me? The papers were already written while I was fighting for my life and our daughters. That wasn't something you decided in a moment, it was waiting. Kolter's jaw tightened. It was because I thought you were seeing someone else, that the baby wasn't mine. Makayla's eyes widened. What? My mother. Makayla's voice rose. Cheating? I never was unfaithful to you. Kolter hesitated. She showed me text messages. You and some guy named Mark. She said, what? No, that didn't happen. If I was having an affair, why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you confront me like a man? Kolter's voice cracked. Because I didn't know how. The woman I loved, I thought she was in love with someone else. I thought you were having his baby. I couldn't. He trailed off, the admission hanging between them. Makayla's expression hardened. So your mother just happened to have divorce papers ready for you to sign while I was in the hospital. Kolter exhaled slowly, the truth settling heavy on him. My mother knew how to manipulate me, and I let her. I was weak. I see that now. Makayla's arms crossed over her chest. So now that you know I wasn't having an affair, so what now? I'll do whatever it takes for you to forgive me, Kolter said, stepping closer. Makayla shook her head, her voice low but steady. I need you to leave. Makayla, please. No, she cut in. Your mother destroyed our life, and you believed her without even giving me the chance to defend myself. That's not something I can forget just because you're sorry now. Kolter stood there for a long moment, his breath visible in the cold air. But when she shut the door, he didn't knock again. Kolter didn't go back to the Winters mansion that night. The thought of walking through those doors, of seeing his mother's face, was unbearable. She hadn't just taken Makayla from him. She had taken his daughter, stolen 3 years of memories he could never get back. He stayed in the city instead, renting a suite at a luxury hotel near the office. For hours, he stared out at the skyline, replaying every choice, every conversation, every moment when he should have questioned her and didn't. The next morning, he was in his office when the door opened without a knock. Brooke Madison strode in, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She carried herself like someone who expected the room to bend to her. Have you changed your mind? She asked without greeting, sliding into the chair opposite his desk. Kolter looked at her for a long moment before answering. No, I want to know my daughter. Brooke's perfectly shaped brows arched. And what about our child? The wedding? We have a date set, vendors booked. He cut her off with a sharp glance, his tone cold. We both know there's no baby. She leaned back, her lips curling into a practiced smirk. Honey, I'm 6 weeks along. Kolter's eyes hardened. If you are, it's not mine. You and I haven't been together in 2 months. I know you and my mother were pushing for this marriage. And I haven't figured out all the reasons why yet, but it's over. The wedding is off. Goodbye, Brooke. For the first time, her composure faltered. This was your mother's idea, she said quickly, her voice lowering. She was losing her grip on you. She promised me a nice portion of the company if I kept you in line. Kolter's jaw tightened until it ached. She promised you a piece of Winters Global? Yes, Brooke admitted, sitting up straighter, her tone almost defiant. And it would have worked if she hadn't shown up you that child. That child, Kolter said, his voice rising, is my daughter. And you stood in my home, in front of her, pretending to carry my child to humiliate her. Do you have any idea what you've done? She humiliated me, Brooke snapped. She made you look at her like you used to look at me. Do you think I'm going to just sit back and let her take you? Kolter stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. Get out. Kolter? Now, his voice thundered through the office. I've made more mistakes than I can count, but marrying you would have been the worst of them. Whatever arrangement you had with my mother, it's finished. If you step into this office again, I'll have security escort you out. Brooke's expression twisted, but she stood, smoothing her skirt as if that could restore her dignity. You'll regret this, she said. But her voice lacked its usual confidence. Kolter didn't answer. He only waited until the door closed behind her before exhaling, his hands braced on the edge of the desk. The alliance between Brooke and his mother was over. But the war for Makayla's trust and a place in Aaliyah's life was only beginning. The Winters mansion was quiet, too quiet for Alexia's liking. The household staff moved with subdued efficiency, their eyes avoiding hers. She sat at the breakfast table with a porcelain cup of tea in her hand, scanning the morning business section when the butler stepped into the room. Mrs. Winters, he said cautiously. Mr. Kolter called early this morning. He asked me to inform you. The engagement to Miss Madison has been called off. Alexia's hand froze halfway to her lips. Called off? Yes, ma'am, effective immediately. She set the cup down with care, though her pulse quickened. Did he give a reason? The butler hesitated. I believe there was a disagreement about the child. Alexia leaned back in her chair, the implications settling over her. Brooke had clearly overplayed her hand. If Kolter had confronted her, then the entire fragile alliance between them had shattered. Moments later, her phone buzzed with a message from Brooke. He ended it. Told me it's because of her and the little girl. Good luck getting anywhere now. Makayla will never let you near her child. Alexia stared at the words. 3 years ago, she'd told herself she was protecting her son, shielding the family name from scandal. In truth, she had acted out of pride and prejudice. She had believed she could dictate his happiness. And now, seeing what the divorce had done to him, the distance in his eyes, the weariness in his shoulders, she couldn't ignore the truth. She had taken something from him she could never replace. Her influence over Kolter had always been absolute. Until now, Alexia rose from the table, crossing the polished floor to the tall windows that overlooked the gardens. She pictured Aaliyah, the granddaughter she had only glimpsed for a moment in the ballroom. Dark eyes that mirrored Kolter's, a stubborn chin that was unmistakably Winters. She wanted to know her. She wanted to hold her. And she knew Kolter's chances of convincing Makayla to allow it were slim. Makayla had every reason to shut the door in her face, and Alexia had earned every ounce of that distrust. But Alexia Winters was not a woman who accepted defeat. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had not called in years. When Makayla's voicemail answered, she spoke clearly, her tone without its usual cutting edge. Makayla, this is Alexia Winters. I know I am the last person you want to hear from, but I would like to speak with you, alone. Not about Kolter, not about the past, about Aaliyah. She ended the call, staring out at the frost-kissed hedges. If Makayla agreed, it would be the most difficult conversation Alexia had ever had. If she didn't, Alexia would find another way. For the first time in years, the Winters matriarch felt the faint, unfamiliar weight of humility. The Winters mansion was quiet, too quiet for Alexia's liking. The household staff moved with subdued efficiency, their eyes avoiding hers. She sat at the breakfast table with a porcelain cup of tea in her hand, scanning the morning business section when the butler stepped into the room. "Mrs. Winters," he said cautiously. "Mr. Kolter called early this morning. He asked me to inform you. The engagement to Miss Madison has been called off." Alexia's hand froze halfway to her lips. "Called off?" "Yes, ma'am, effective immediately." She set the cup down with care, though her pulse quickened. "Did he give a reason?" The butler hesitated. "I believe there was a disagreement about the child." Alexia leaned back in her chair, the implications settling over her. Brooke had clearly overplayed her hand. If Kolter had confronted her, then the entire fragile alliance between them had shattered. Moments later, her phone buzzed with a message from Brooke. "He ended it. Told me it's because of her and the little girl. Good luck getting anywhere now. Makayla will never let you near her child." Alexia stared at the words. 3 years ago, she told herself she was protecting her son, shielding the family name from scandal. In truth, she had acted out of pride and prejudice. She had believed she could dictate his happiness. And now, seeing what the divorce had done to him, the distance in his eyes, the weariness in his shoulders, she couldn't ignore the truth. She had taken something from him she could never replace. Her influence over Kolter had always been absolute. Until now. Alexia rose from the table, crossing the polished floor to the tall windows that overlooked the gardens. She pictured Aaliyah, the granddaughter she had only glimpsed for a moment in the ballroom. Dark eyes that mirrored Kolter's, a stubborn chin that was unmistakably Winters. She wanted to know her. She wanted to hold her. And she knew Kolter's chances of convincing Makayla to allow it were slim. Makayla had every reason to shut the door in her face, and Alexia had earned every ounce of that distrust. But Alexia Winters was not a woman who accepted defeat. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had not called in years. When Makayla's voicemail answered, she spoke clearly, her tone without its usual cutting edge. "Makayla, this is Alexia Winters. I know I am the last person you want to hear from, but I would like to speak with you, alone. Not about Kolter, not about the past. About Aaliyah." She ended the call, staring out at the frost-kissed hedges. If Makayla agreed, it would be the most difficult conversation Alexia had ever had. If she didn't, Alexia would find another way. For the first time in years, the Winters matriarch felt the faint, unfamiliar weight of humility. Janet's eyes were narrow slits as she stood beside Makayla, her arms folded like a fortress wall. "I told you this woman has no nerves," Janet muttered under her breath. "Destroyed your marriage, and now she strolls up here like she's the Pope handing out blessings." Alexia shifted on her feet, visibly uncomfortable under Janet's stare, but forcing a calm smile toward Makayla. "Can we talk privately?" she asked softly. "No," Janet said flatly before Makayla could answer. "I'm not leaving." Alexia's lips tightened. "I'm here to say, I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Makayla arched a brow, skepticism written all over her face. "You're sorry? For what exactly?" Alexia's eyes darted away. "I really didn't think the child was going to live. If I had known." Makayla's voice cracked like a whip. "If you had known what? That I'd survive long enough for you to find another way to destroy my marriage?" There was a pause. Long enough for Alexia to breathe in, but not long enough to avoid the truth. "Probably so," she admitted quietly. Janet made a disgusted noise. She actually said it out loud. "Lord, give me strength." Makayla's voice was ice. "Why are you here, Mrs. Winters?" "To see my granddaughter," Alexia said, her voice trembling, "and to beg you to forgive me. What I did was wrong, so wrong. Kolter hasn't been the same since the divorce." Makayla stepped forward, her chin tilted in defiance. "Mrs. Winters, I am not letting you anywhere near my child so you can manipulate her the same way you've manipulated your son." Alexia nodded slowly, almost as if she expected the blow. "That's fair. I haven't been a good mother." Makayla's laugh was bitter and humorless. "A good mother? You told your son I was cheating on him. You told him his child was another man's. You didn't even bother to see if your grandchild lived or died. You never liked me, Mrs. Winters." Not because of anything I did, but because of my background, my status, and my skin color. That's not totally true, Alexia said, wincing. Makayla's voice rose. Don't you dare stand here and try to rewrite history. You wanted Kolter with someone you approved of, someone who could benefit the company. Alexia lifted her chin, her old arrogance flickering through. Kolter needed someone who understood the value and connection to the Winters legacy. So that's why you pushed another woman on him? Makayla shot back. Fine, but that doesn't explain why you planned an engagement party just to humiliate me, when I was already gone from your lives. What was the point, Mrs. Winters? What satisfaction did you get out of that? Alexia's voice faltered. I thought if I could hurt you enough, you'd stay away for good. Makayla took a step closer, her voice trembling now, not with fear, but with righteous fury. You don't have to worry about that. I have no plans of letting you get close to my child, ever. I understand your anger, Alexia said, but Aaliyah is a Winters. She will always be one, and she deserves every right and privilege that name carries. We don't want anything from you, Makayla replied sharply. Not your money, not your name, and certainly not your approval. A heavy silence hung between them, thick with years of bitterness. Finally, Alexia's voice softened. Are you going to let Kolter see his child? Makayla's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. Alexia flinched at the finality in her tone. Makayla, you may hate me, but Kolter loves that little girl. You're punishing him for my sins. Makayla's eyes glistened. I'm protecting my daughter from a toxic family. Kolter's welcome to see her, if he comes to me like a man, not through his mother's interference. Janet stepped in then, her presence towering even though she didn't move closer. You've said your piece, Mrs. Winters. Time's up. Alexia's shoulders slumped. For the first time, her sharp, calculating expression cracked, revealing something almost human, regret. Tell Kolter I tried. Makayla didn't respond. She just stood in the doorway, her daughter's laughter faint in the background, and waited for the woman who had tried to erase her to walk away. Alexia hesitated for a fraction of a second longer, but Janet's cold glare was the final push. She turned, heels clicking against the porch, and left without looking back. When the door shut, Janet exhaled. That woman's lucky I didn't drag her down those steps myself. Makayla's hands trembled slightly, though her voice was steady. She'll be back. People like her never give up, especially when they've lost control. Janet's eyes softened. And when she comes, we'll be ready. You're not alone in this, Makayla. Not now, not ever. Makayla was rinsing dishes in the kitchen when she heard a car pull into the driveway. She glanced out the window and froze. Kolter Winters was stepping out of a sleek black sedan, his coat collar turned up against the cold. Janet was in the living room, folding laundry, but when she saw him approaching the porch, she moved toward the door. If you're here to defend her, I'm not, Kolter said firmly, holding up a hand. I'm not here to defend her. I'm here to tell you, she's no longer a part of my life. Janet studied him for a long moment, looking for any sign of hesitation. We've heard things like that before. Not from me, he said. Not like this. I told her I can't forgive what she's done, what she took from me. She will never meet Aaliyah unless Makayla decides it's right. I'm done letting her decide my life for me. From the kitchen doorway, Makayla appeared, her arms crossed. So now you've decided to cut her off. 3 years too late. Kolter turned toward her, the weight of her words sinking into him. I know, he admitted. I should have done it the day I walked out of that hospital. I should have believed in you. Silence hung between them, heavy with all the years they had lost. I'm looking for a place in the city, he continued. Somewhere I can make my own decisions without her shadow over me. Somewhere I can start over. Makayla's brow furrowed. And you think that changes anything? That an apartment and a promise erase what happened? No, Kolter said quickly. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I'm asking for a chance to prove myself, to show you I can be someone Aaliyah can be proud of. I'll do whatever it takes to be in her life. Makayla's jaw tightened. You say that like it's just about showing up now. It's about the nights I was alone in the NICU, watching her struggle to breathe. It's about birthdays you missed, milestones you never knew happened. You can't undo that. His voice softened. I know I can't, but I can be there for everything that comes next, if you'll let me. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the man she had once trusted. You're asking me to believe in you again, Kolter. That's not something I can give easily. I'll earn it, he promised, his tone steady, even if it takes years. Makayla glanced toward the living room, where the sound of Aaliyah's toys clinking drifted faintly from the open door to her room. If you hurt her, she said quietly, even once, I won't hesitate to cut you out, permanently. Kolter nodded, a faint flicker of relief passing through his eyes. I wouldn't expect anything less. For the first time since that night at the mansion, the conversation ended without slammed doors or raised voices, but with a fragile, unspoken possibility hanging in the air. Kolter kept his word. He didn't push his way into Aaliyah's life. Instead, he started with the things Makayla hadn't expected. Small, steady gestures that asked for nothing in return. When the daycare's heater broke during a cold snap, Kolter was the one who arranged a repair within hours, covering the cost without fanfare. When Makayla's delivery van needed new tires, the replacements appeared in her driveway before she had a chance to schedule an appointment. He even volunteered at a local food drive her catering company supported, wearing an apron and stacking boxes alongside her staff, without announcing who he was. Makayla noticed. She didn't say so, but she noticed. Meanwhile, in a luxury condo across town, Brooke Madison was not letting go. Her carefully curated image had taken a blow after the engagement was abruptly canceled, and she was determined to turn the narrative in her favor. Whispers had already begun, people wondering if she had lost Kolter to his tragic first love, speculating about the mysterious child at the Winters party. Brooke intended to feed those whispers until they favored her. She booked interviews under the guise of charity appearances, casually dropping hints about difficulties she'd faced because of someone from Kolter's past. She staged photographs with sympathetic friends, making herself the wounded party in a love triangle she'd largely invented. But Aaliyah Winters had been watching. When she learned what Brooke was doing, and that she was trying to leverage Kolter's name for her own publicity, Aaliyah called her to the mansion. Brooke arrived expecting a strategy session. Instead, she found Aaliyah standing by the tall windows, her expression carved from ice. I'm only going to say this once, Aaliyah began, her voice low and precise. You will stop using my son's name. You will stop insinuating anything about his child or Makayla, and you will leave town. Brooke's eyes widened. Excuse me, you are the one who... Aaliyah cut her off. Wes, I encouraged the engagement. You're pregnant. They attempted to trap Kolter with a stunt designed to humiliate the mother of his child. I will make sure everyone knows it was all your idea. Brooke's confidence faltered. You wouldn't dare. I'll do more than dare, Aaliyah said sharply. Your name will be poison in every social circle worth entering. No one will touch you, not here, not anywhere in this state. You'll be lucky to get invited to garden parties in towns no one can find on a map. If you want to avoid that fate, you'll disappear quietly. For a moment, Brooke searched Aaliyah's face for some trace of the ally she had once had. There was none. Aaliyah's voice softened only slightly. I will not allow anyone, especially you, to damage my son further. This is over. Brooke left without another word, but the tension in her shoulders promised she wouldn't stay gone for long. The call came on a gray, icy morning. Kolter's car had hit a patch of black ice on the highway just outside the city limits. He'd been driving back from an early meeting when the vehicle skidded, spun, and slammed into a guardrail. He was lucky. At least that's what the paramedics told him. A broken leg, some bruised ribs, and a nasty gash along his forehead could have been much worse. But he'd need weeks of rest, and his doctor made it clear. No stairs, no overexertion, and absolutely no work for the next month. Word reached both Makayla and Aaliyah quickly, and for the first time in years, the two women agreed on something. This wasn't the moment for fighting. A truce, unspoken but solid enough, formed in the quiet hours of that day. When Kolter was discharged from the hospital, Makayla made a decision she couldn't quite explain even to herself. "He'll stay at my place," she told Janet, her voice steady. "Aaliyah's with you during the day. He needs someone to help him, and his mother's house isn't an option." Janet didn't argue, though her brows lifted. "You sure you're ready for that?" Makayla's answer was simple. "It's temporary." Kolter arrived later that afternoon, leaning heavily on crutches. Seeing him in her living room was strange. He looked different, humbled somehow, with his leg in a cast and his usual air of control stripped away. The first days were quiet. Makayla helped him settle in, made sure his pain medicine was on schedule, brought him meals, and kept conversation to polite necessities. But in the evenings, when the house was still, small exchanges began to grow between them. It started with stories about Aaliyah, things Kolter had missed, the milestones he wished he'd seen. Then came moments from their marriage, memories of the good years before everything fell apart. "I thought I was protecting myself," Kolter admitted one night, his voice low. "But I was just protecting my mother's version of the truth. I didn't realize how much of my life she'd been writing for me." Makayla listened in silence, the words settling into places she'd kept locked for years. Another evening, while she adjusted his pillows, he said quietly, "I know I can't undo the years I missed, but if you'd let me, I'd spend the rest of my life trying to make the next ones count." Her heart softened, just a little. The hurt was still there, raw and real, but in the soft glow of the lamp, she could see the man she had once loved looking back at her. Forgiveness was still far away, but the distance between them had shifted, just enough for hope to slip through. At first, Aaliyah kept her distance. When Kolter moved into Makayla's home for his recovery, the little girl eyed him warily from behind Janet's legs during drop-offs, clutching her small backpack like a shield. But as the days passed, curiosity began to win over caution. She started lingering in the living room when he was there, peeking from the doorway while he read from one of the storybooks Makayla had left on the coffee table. One afternoon, Makayla returned from the kitchen to find Aaliyah sitting cross-legged on the floor near Kolter's recliner, carefully arranging her crayons while he watched with a faint smile. "Those are nice colors," Kolter said, his voice gentle. Aaliyah nodded solemnly. "This one's my favorite," she said, holding up a bright purple crayon. "That was my favorite color too when I was little," Kolter replied. It was a small moment, but it settled into Makayla's heart like a pebble dropped into still water, sending ripples she wasn't ready to name. Over the next week, Aaliyah's visits to the living room became routine. She brought him drawings, asked him to read short stories, and once even shyly offered him a cookie from the tin Janet had baked. Kolter never pushed, never reached for more than she was ready to give. Makayla noticed, and though part of her felt an unexpected warmth seeing her daughter smile, another part tightened in fear. One evening, after Aaliyah was asleep, Janet pulled Makayla aside in the kitchen. "She's warming up to him," Janet said, her tone quiet but serious. Makayla nodded. "I know. That little girl's heart is tender," Janet continued. "If he's here, he has to stay in her life. She can't go through him disappearing." Makayla leaned against the counter, the weight of her mother's words heavy on her chest. "I'm not blind to the risk, Mama. I don't know if I'm ready to trust him yet." "Then guard your heart," Janet said firmly, "and hers even more. Men can say a lot of things when they're trying to make up for the past. What matters is what they do when the hard days come." Makayla swallowed hard. She wanted to believe Kolter's small, consistent gestures meant something lasting. But the memory of hospital nights, unanswered questions, and betrayal was never far away. Still, when she glanced toward the living room and saw Kolter asleep in the recliner, a half-finished crayon drawing of a purple flower on his lap, she felt her resolve waver, just a little. The call came early on a Saturday morning. Makayla was in the kitchen packing pastries into boxes for a high-profile corporate luncheon when her phone rang. The event coordinator's voice was frantic. Their original venue had experienced a burst water pipe, flooding the kitchen and rendering it unusable. The luncheon was still on, but they had no prep space and only 4 hours until guests began arriving. Makayla's mind spun through options, each one falling apart as quickly as it formed. Her commercial kitchen was too small for the full menu. Borrowing another catering space meant hours lost in setup. Kolter appeared in the doorway, still leaning on a cane, but already dressed in jeans and a button-down. "What's wrong?" She hesitated, but the panic in her voice was obvious. "My venue's kitchen is underwater. I can't produce half the menu from here. I'm about to lose the biggest client I've ever had." Kolter didn't think twice. "Use Winters Global." Makayla blinked. "What?" "The company kitchen on the top floor," he said quickly. "We cater for shareholders' dinners all the time. Industrial equipment, double the staff space." "I'll make the call." She hesitated. "Kolter, that's—" "Makayla," he interrupted, already reaching for his phone. "Let me do this." Within 15 minutes, they were in the Winters Global executive kitchen, the staff already pulling out equipment under Kolter's direction. He moved easily among them, taking orders from Makayla without hesitation, fetching ingredients, and even plating hors d'oeuvres when the pace grew frantic. By the time the luncheon began, every dish was ready, every tray perfect. Other client was so impressed, they asked for her card before the event was over. Later, as they loaded the last crate into her van, Makayla turned to him. "You didn't have to do that." Kolter smiled faintly. "I wanted to. And I want to do more." "What do you mean?" He leaned against the van door, the winter air visible in his breath. "I'm stepping back from Winters Global for a while. The company can run without me. My life can't run without the people I care about. I want to help promote your business. I have connections, platforms, media access. I can put Aaliyah's table in front of the people who can make it grow." Makayla searched his face, looking for any sign of ulterior motive. "Why?" "Because I believe in you," he said simply, "and because helping you succeed is the best way I know to prove that I'm not walking away again." For the first time, she didn't have an immediate reply. The thought of Winters, resources behind her business was tempting, but so was the risk of letting him that far back into her life. Still, she didn't say no. Kolter kept his word. Within weeks, Makayla's phone was ringing with opportunities she'd once only dreamed of. A gala for one of the city's largest charities, a weekend retreat for a well-known tech company, even a private anniversary dinner for a retired senator and his wife. Each introduction came through a friend of a friend, but she knew Kolter's influence was behind it. He never made a show of it, no bragging, no reminders, just quiet nudges that seemed to position her and Aaliyah's table exactly where it needed to be. And somewhere in the rhythm of planning menus and coordinating events, Makayla found herself speaking to him more, trusting him in small ways. When a supplier tried to raise prices last minute, Kolter handled the negotiation. When a delivery truck broke down on the morning of a wedding, he was already on the phone arranging a backup before she even called him. Still, he never pushed. Kolter knew he was playing the long game. His goal wasn't just to be part of Makayla's business, it was to be part of her life again, to be part of their life. He wanted his family back, but he also knew the wounds he'd caused wouldn't heal with grand gestures. They needed time, patience, and proof. There were moments when that patience was tested. Men noticed Makayla. She was striking, confident, and successful, and unlike the woman she'd been 3 years ago, she no longer second-guessed her worth. There were invitations for coffee after meetings, offers for dinner from clients' friends. Sometimes she accepted, sometimes she politely declined. Kolter never said a word. Even when he saw her leave an event smiling at another man's joke, or when she came home with that subtle glow of someone who'd enjoyed good company. It hurt, more than he cared to admit, but he had no rights, no claim. Instead, he let the ache sit quietly in his chest, reminding himself that this wasn't about competing for her attention. It was about showing her that he could be the man she deserved, the father Aaliyah deserved. And every time he saw Aaliyah run to her with open arms, laughing as Makayla swung her up into the air, Kolter's resolve only strengthened. He wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where sunlight filtered soft and golden through the curtains. Warming the kitchen table where Makayla sat with her laptop open, Aaliyah was on the floor nearby, coloring intently, while Kolter read the newspaper from his seat across the room. Makayla wasn't watching them, not really, but she caught the moment anyway. Aaliyah reached for a crayon that had rolled too far, frowning when her short arms couldn't quite get it. Before Makayla could move, Kolter set aside the paper, lowered himself carefully to the floor, despite the stiffness in his leg, and slid the crayon toward her. "Thanks, Daddy," Aaliyah said, so casually it took Makayla's breath away. Kolter froze, his eyes meeting Makayla's for the briefest moment before he smiled faintly at his daughter. "Anytime, sweetheart." Makayla felt something shift inside her. A quiet, reluctant loosening of the wall she'd kept so firmly in place. It had been 2 years of him showing up. Not demanding, not pushing, just being there. And now, here was their daughter, giving him the title he'd once thrown away without a thought. That evening, after Janet took Aaliyah for a sleepover, Kolter lingered in the kitchen. "There's something I've been meaning to show you," he said, his voice quieter than usual. He disappeared into the guest room and returned with a worn leather journal, its edges softened from years of use. He set it on the table in front of her. "I started this after the divorce. I didn't know how to talk to you, so I wrote instead. Every time I thought about you." "Or her?" Makayla hesitated, then opened to the first page. His handwriting was bold, sometimes messy, as though the emotions had been too strong to write neatly. She read about the nights he couldn't sleep, the dreams where he heard her laugh, the hollow ache of missing a child he thought had never lived. Some entries were angry, self-condemning. Others were almost desperate in their longing. And as she turned the pages, she began to see not just the man she'd divorced, but the man who had been quietly unraveling without her. She reached a page dated almost a year after the split. "If I could go back to that hospital room, I'd take every word my mother said and throw it out the window. I'd hold you close and never let go." By the time she closed the journal, her hands trembled. She looked up at him, stunned. Not just at the raw emotion, but at the vulnerability of putting it all in her hands. Kolter's gaze held hers. "I never stopped thinking about you. Not once, and I'm not going to stop now." Makayla didn't answer right away, but for the first time, she didn't tell him to leave. Makayla sat on the edge of her bed that evening, the leather journal resting in her lap. She had read every page twice, and still the words clung to her. Raw, aching, impossible to ignore. Her mother's footsteps came down the hallway, and a moment later Janet appeared in the doorway. "You've been quiet since Aaliyah left. Everything all right?" Makayla swallowed, then held out the journal. "It's Kolter's. He started writing after the divorce. He gave it to me today." Janet took it, flipping through a few pages before looking back at her daughter. "And why are you showing me this?" Makayla hesitated. "Because I don't know what to do. Mama, I think I still love him." Janet set the journal aside and gave her a steady look. "Do you still love him?" Makayla's eyes filled before she could answer. Her voice cracked. "Yes, I do. It's crazy, but I do. That's why I've never let myself get close to anyone else. I was afraid of what that meant." Janet reached over, taking her hand. "Baby, he spent the last 2 years proving himself. Maybe it's time to see where you two stand. Sit down and have a real talk. No anger, no walls." Makayla nodded slowly, the fear in her chest mixing with something far warmer. That night, she found Kolter in the kitchen, rinsing a coffee mug. He looked up, sensing the shift in her. "Can we talk?" she asked. They sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between them. Makayla folded her hands, steadying herself. "What do you want from me, Kolter? Not the polite version, the truce." He didn't hesitate. "My family back," he said softly. "I'm not going to rush you. I know we have a lot to work through, but that's what I want. You, Aaliyah, us." Makayla's throat tightened, and she let the tears fall freely. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I want that too. So let's start with a date, see where it goes. Kolter's hands closed over hers, warm and firm. His eyes softened in a way that made her heart ache. "Thank you," he said, his voice low with emotion. For the first time in years, the possibility of a future together didn't feel impossible. It felt like the first cautious step towards something worth rebuilding. The year that followed was unlike any they had shared before. It was not a rush back into old habits, nor was it a smooth, storybook reunion. It was work, gentle, sometimes awkward, often vulnerable work. They relearned each other's rhythms. They went on quiet dinners after Aaliyah was asleep, rediscovered the joy of cooking together, and spent Sunday afternoons walking through the park with their daughter. There were difficult conversations too, about the past, about trust, about boundaries, but each one seemed to weave them closer rather than drive them apart. Makayla found herself smiling more, laughing at his dry humor, and seeing the man she had fallen in love with emerge again, only now, tempered by humility and growth. One crisp autumn evening, Kolter invited her to join him for a walk after dinner. Aaliyah had fallen asleep early. Janet was happy to watch over her, and the air was cool with the faint scent of fallen leaves. They strolled along the quiet street, their hands brushing now and then. When they reached the park bench where they had first sat together, after their initial first date, the year before, Kolter stopped. "Makayla," he began, his voice calm but carrying something deeper beneath it. "A year ago, you gave me a second chance. You didn't have to, but you did. And every day since, I've been working to show you that I will never take that for granted again." He reached into his coat pocket and took out a small velvet box. Taking her hand, he placed it in her palm. Makayla's breath caught. Her fingers trembled around the box, but she didn't open it. She simply shook her head. Emotions swelling in her throat too fast for words. Kolter smiled faintly and took the box back, flipping it open himself. Inside was a simple yet elegant diamond ring, one that sparkled even in the dim lamplight. Without waiting for her to speak, he slid the ring onto her finger. "I'm asking you to marry me," he said quietly, his voice steady and certain. "Not to erase the past, but to build a future. Our future. Will you?" Makayla blinked against the tears that filled her eyes. She still couldn't speak, so she only nodded, a soft, trembling smile breaking across her face. Kolter's own breath hitched as relief and joy mingled in his expression. He cupped her face, leaning forward to kiss her, gentle, certain, and full of promise. For them, the circle wasn't closing, it was beginning again. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the kind of morning that seemed to promise a fresh start. Makayla stood in front of the mirror in a soft ivory gown, smoothing her hands over the fabric. Janet fussed over a loose curl, while Aaliyah twirled nearby in a white dress of her own, clutching the basket of rose petals she would scatter down the aisle. Out in the courtyard, guests found their seats among flower-lined rows. At the very back, Kolter Winters sat quietly, her usual aura of control replaced with something humbler. This wasn't her day to command attention. It was her day to prove she belonged here. Kolter had made it clear, if Aaliyah wanted a place in Aaliyah's life, she had to show she had truly changed. That change had started 2 years ago, with simple things, birthday gifts sent without expectation, video calls where she asked about school and listened without steering the conversation toward herself. Makayla hadn't forgotten the past, but she had watched how Aaliyah lit up during those short calls, how she liked showing her grandmother new drawings or telling her about her friends. It was on Aaliyah's terms, and Makayla allowed it because she could see her daughter was in control of the pace. When the ceremony began, Aaliyah walked proudly down the aisle, tossing petals with wide sweeps of her small hand. Kolter's eyes shone as he watched her, and when Makayla finally joined him under the floral arch, there was no doubt in either of their minds. They were exactly where they were meant to be. As vows were exchanged and the guests applauded, Aaliyah stayed seated, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't rush forward for photographs or make herself the center of a moment that wasn't hers. Later, as Makayla held Aaliyah on her hip during the reception, Alexia approached cautiously. "You looked beautiful," she said quietly. "Thank you," Makayla replied, her tone polite but guarded. Alexia looked to her granddaughter. "And you, little one, you are the best flower girl I've ever seen." Aaliyah giggled, hiding her face in Makayla's shoulder before peeking out. "We can call tonight?" Alexia smiled, the question softening her face. "I'd like that." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a bridge. And for the first time, everyone seemed willing to cross it slowly, together. As the evening faded into golden light, Kolter slipped his arm around Makayla's waist, his new wedding band glinting. "We made it," he whispered. She smiled up at him, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Yes," she said, watching Aaliyah wave at her grandmother across the courtyard. "We did." The first year of Makayla and Kolter's married life was not a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. They built a rhythm that balanced business, parenting, and the slow but steady rebuilding of trust. Kolter had stepped back even further from Winters Global, working part-time as a consultant while dedicating the rest of his energy to Makayla's catering company. With his connections and her skill, Aaliyah's table had grown into one of the city's most sought-after boutique catering services. There were small arguments, of course, over schedules, over who forgot to pick up milk, over the occasional late night at the office. But those disagreements ended with honest talks, not silence. Neither of them would risk letting misunderstandings linger the way they had in the past. Aaliyah thrived in the new stability. She loved having her father there for bedtime stories, weekend pancake breakfasts, and school drop-offs. She had learned to run into his arms without hesitation, her earlier reserve replaced by a confident, happy affection. And then there was Alexia Winters. Her redemption was not swift or simple. At first, her relationship with Makayla remained cool. Their conversations limited to Aaliyah's school updates or holiday plans. But Alexia stayed consistent. She kept every video call she promised, sent thoughtful birthday gifts for Aaliyah that had nothing to do with status or money, and never spoke a negative word about Makayla in her granddaughter's presence. 6 months in, Makayla allowed occasional supervised visits in person. Alexia would join them at the park, or stop by for an hour in the afternoon. She listened more than she spoke, asking Aaliyah about her friends, her art projects, and her favorite foods. One afternoon, after Alexia had taken Aaliyah to a puppet show, she returned her to Makayla with a shy smile. "I've been seeing someone about my tendency to control everything," she admitted quietly. "I don't expect that to change how you feel overnight, but I want to be better for her and for my son." Makayla didn't respond right away, but later she told Kolter, "I believe she's trying, and that's more than I thought I'd ever say." By the end of their first year, Alexia had become a regular, still not part of the inner circle, but no longer an outsider. She respected boundaries now, and Makayla found herself for the first time cautiously hopeful about her mother-in-law's place in their lives. On their first wedding anniversary, Kolter surprised Makayla with a dinner he had planned himself. Just the two of them, in the same park where he'd proposed. "To us," he said, raising his glass, "and to the family we fought for." Makayla smiled, clinking her glass with his. To the family we're still building. As the sun dipped low, they watched Aaliyah running through the grass with Alexia walking slowly behind her. A picture that, a few years ago, Makayla would have thought impossible. Some wounds would always leave scars, but in the quiet glow of that evening, Makayla knew that healing was no longer just a hope. It was something they were living day by day. The end. Thanks for listening to Green Tea Tales. Help support our channel with comments, likes, and subscribe.